Hello, everyone. We are so fortunate today. We have with us Kate Stillwell. She's the CEO and founder of Jumpstart. This is a remarkable new earthquake insurance program that really has the potential to help preserve communities that are impacted by earthquakes. Stick around. You don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. Now, Kate, tell us a little bit about Jumpstart.
Jumpstart gets consumers a financial jumpstart, money, right away after a natural disaster. And we're starting with earthquakes in California.
Now, this is a fascinating new model because, among other things, I was fascinated by the fact that the payout is not tied to losses directly.
That's right.
But to the amount of shaking instead. Tell us a little bit about that interesting new structure.
Sure. So Jumpstart is the first parametric insurance for consumers for earthquake risk. And parametric means that there's a lump sum that pays out based simply on the occurrence of a piece of data. In other words, a parameter. And in the case of an earthquake, the occurrence of the earthquake with a specific shaking intensity as defined by the US Geological Survey. So one of the innovations for a parametric policy is that this data is publicly available and transparent. So it really levels the playing field between the person receiving the money, the insured, and the insurance company. There isn't that imbalance of power that people really hate about insurance.
So after an event that triggers this, I understand that you send a text to the consumer, the insured, and you say, there was an event, a qualifying event, did you have damage? And that, if I understand it, that's the sum of the application for benefits process. Is that right?
Correct. So the claims process, the entire claims process is the earthquake occurs, our technology automatically calculates who is in the payment eligibility zone based on the data that we receive from USGS, sends these text messages to the people in the payment eligibility zone saying, will you have extra expenses? They don't even have to have damage in the classical sense of breakage. They just need to be able to use the money for something related to earthquake. As soon as they respond yes, that same day we initiate the payment to their preferred payment destination.
Wow. Now, I think you're limiting the insurance to $10,000. Am I
That's right.
Understanding that correctly?
That's right.
Can you buy smaller chunks, or is it 10K or nothing?
We started with a single product. Because it's the first product in market that's like this, we want to have it as clear as possible because there's a hurdle of consumer education and understanding. We don't want to introduce too many options all at once. So it's a $10,000 product, although every adult can buy their own policy, even if they live in the same location.
Okay, so roommates, spouses, etc. So 10 grand doesn't do much for a $2 million home, but it's a huge difference for a renter that might be displaced by an earthquake, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's exactly who Jumpstart is for. Sure, there are people who already buy their regular earthquake insurance for their high-value homes and also buy Jumpstart to cover a portion of the deductible, but mainly our goal is to get more money into the system for people who would otherwise choose to move away. And part of the reason that somebody might move away is not having sufficient finances to be able to partake in the rebuild and help out their neighbors. So we founded Jumpstart to bring more money into the system, particularly for the people for whom $10,000 makes a really big difference in the choices that they make when a shock hits them.
It also has this interesting community appeal. And what really got my attention was this notion that one of the things that makes a community resilient to a disaster of this sort is the number of people who stay in the community. Now, you're an engineer. You probably looked at this from an analytical standpoint. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned as you looked at that question.
Right. Well, it's true. I am a structural engineer by training and spent 10 years of my career designing buildings to be safe in earthquakes. But it was the human side that really caused me to have a professional crisis and change and move away from that. And it was Hurricane Katrina in particular. And seeing all of the consequences of that were not necessary, some of which were related to the built environment, the physical infrastructure, but many of which were unrelated. They were related to the financial infrastructure. They were related to social connectedness. They were related to good governance. And that disaster, Katrina in particular, helped me change direction and say, have a professional crisis of sorts, saying, what other dimensions of the resilience puzzle are there that we need to help solve in addition to the built environment? And in particular, the financial resilience of a community is largely dependent on how much economic stimulus comes in afterward from the private market. So getting off a little bit of a tangent here, but if you'll let me speak, there's a really good rebound story for the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. And we happen to be talking on the anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. And after that earthquake, there was a massive public inflow of funds in order to prepare for the 1915 Pan American Expo, which put San Francisco on the map for a global cosmopolitan city. But that level, that magnitude of public investment after a disaster is just no longer feasible in this day and age. And so the private market really has to fill that gap, but it's not filling that gap right now because 9 out of 10 people are choosing to not buy insurance for disasters that are excluded from a typical renter's policy or a typical homeowner's policy. So that leaves 9 out of 10 people without that economic inflow. And so there's an opportunity to multiply the amount of money that comes into, the amount of economic stimulus that comes into California or into New Orleans or into Houston by a factor of 10. And fundamentally, that is our goal. It's written in our articles of incorporation as a benefit corporation to multiply the amount of economic stimulus into a community after a natural disaster.
Now you started Jumpstart 3 years ago, but I wonder, have you had, you didn't start selling policies immediately. And so how long have you been selling policies, and have you had a payout yet?
We started selling policies in October of 2018, so that was just over 6 months ago. We have not experienced an earthquake that would have triggered a payout. Those earthquakes happen on average 3 or 4 times per decade, so it's not unusual that within 6 months we haven't had that level of earthquake. So that begs the question of what is the level of shaking that would trigger a payout? You didn't ask it, but I'll answer it anyway, which is it's any earthquake that produces a red zone in the US Geological Survey shake map. So these are the maps that the USGS produces. Everybody's used to seeing these color contour maps. Anything that's in the red zone where it starts to shift from yellow to red is eligible for the payment. There is a technical definition behind that too, but fundamentally it's the red zone. So the last earthquake that created one of these red zones in California was the 2014 Napa earthquake, which was a magnitude 6.0. And the red zone in that earthquake covered the whole city of Napa and extended to the south towards Vallejo. But it didn't reach as far as Oakland and Berkeley, which makes sense because Oakland and Berkeley weren't disrupted in the way that life was messed up in Napa.
Yeah, fascinating. So you're looking at extending this beyond earthquake insurance to other natural disasters. What are some of those objective criteria that you might use for determining whether someone is going to receive a payout for a flood or some other natural disaster?
Right, great question. And so the predecessor question is, what hazards lend themselves to a parametric product? And there are two criteria. One is that there is this objective piece of data that can be used to trigger the payments. But the second is that there's a big gap in the number of people who buy it. And so for the most part, that means that those hazards are excluded from your regular insurance. So let's think about those two criteria. What's excluded from regular insurance? Flood is excluded. And it just so happens that flood has a measurable piece of data, which is water depth. And like for the earthquake trigger, we can measure water depth. We can use a water depth measurement from a transparent source. It doesn't have to be measured house by house, although if you installed sensors and had an IoT solution, maybe you could do that. But at a neighborhood level, the purpose of a Jumpstart policy is really to buffer and cushion against the disruption to life in general. So even if your house doesn't get flooded, even if your house doesn't get earthquake damage, there might be damage to the community as long as the water reached a certain depth down the block. And so water depth, even if it's not exactly at your house, is still a relevant parameter for applying parametric to a flood hazard.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, Kate, you alluded to your exposure to Katrina as a motivating factor for Jumpstart. Tell us a little bit about how that translated for you as a structural engineer into launching Jumpstart.
Yeah, I can remember the moment of watching the news and seeing the folks and having the levees the levees be topped over, and thinking to myself very specifically, having a feeling of in the pit of my stomach, and thinking to myself, in the next big earthquake, Oakland is going to be the next New Orleans. So Oakland is my hometown. It's where I live. It's where our office is, and it has many of the same socioeconomic diversity as New Orleans. And that's part of what makes Oakland really rich city and something where I'm really proud to live. But 40% of the residents of New Orleans at that time moved away and never came back, still have not come back. The population of New Orleans has rebounded somewhat, but most of which is with new residents. And so Oakland would change very dramatically, and it would lose a lot of its intrinsic rich cultural richness if 40% of the population moved away and never came back.
Boy, that's so true. That's so true. Kate, what are you most proud of having accomplished in your career?
I was just thinking about this yesterday. What gratifies me the most is to have made something good for the world. So the making is so gratifying. The making something good is really gratifying. And the making something good that serves a lot of people is really, really gratifying. And it has taken a lot of stamina and a lot of tenacity. There have been times when I think to myself, oh, I wish I just had an easy job, like bagging groceries at the grocery store. I could work for minimum wage and then I would actually be earning money. But at the end of the day, there is nothing I would rather be dedicating my life to than making Jumpstart a reality and getting our communities more money to be able to plow back and really stimulate that recovery process for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. So Kate, what is the most important lesson you've learned as you've embarked on this Jumpstart initiative?
Oh, I think kind of the same lesson that people experience in a natural disaster, which is prepare to be surprised. Nothing will go as planned. And to the extent possible, it's helpful to have some options, have some cushions that you can use for many purposes. So that's the good thing about having money after a natural disaster. You can put it to many different uses. But likewise, from a startup perspective, patience. So the power of time. I never would have thought about how much time is my friend and how I can use time to my advantage in discussions with potential partners or thinking about when to phase different activities of the organization. And it runs counterintuitive to the current culture, which is go fast, go fast. There's all this FOMO, fear of missing out, and you have to grow quickly or die. Actually, if I can find ways to use time to buy ourselves options, that's been super powerful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Kate, what is your superpower?
I would say that one thing I'm proud of in terms of, I hesitate to use the word superpower, but one thing I like to do is create new initiatives. So Jumpstart is not the first initiative that I've founded. And in particular, initiatives that have to pull together from disparate thought processes or disparate sources of resources. So like for Jumpstart, for example, we had to pull together the technical resources of building the technology, also the technical resources of doing the actuarial and pricing modeling, but also the aspect of marketing and getting it out there to consumers, not just marketing to businesses, convincing the existing insurance community that this was a good risk to take. And then of course, finding staff and attracting staff.
Well, pulling all that together is a superpower, and I congratulate you for doing that. Well, Kate, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I know you're busy. Before you go, would you take just a moment to tell everyone how they can learn more about Jumpstart and how they can connect with you personally?
Yes, please do connect with me. On social media, our handle is Your Jumpstart, YOURJUMPSTART. Our website is jumpstartrecovery.com. The idea being that Jumpstart helps you jumpstart your own recovery, so jumpstartrecovery.com. Look forward to getting in touch with everyone.
Fantastic. Well, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and we wish you every success in helping to protect more people from natural disasters.
Thank you.
All righty, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.